All right, here we go. It is time for Stud Stories. What's up, y'all? I'm David Summers. We've got the stud. All we need is the story. And now, he is the Tennessee stud, Ron Fuller. Hey, Ron, what's going on? What's the story?
Oh, man, well, I'm going to give it to you right away here. We're getting closer to finishing with these NWA World Champions that I wrestled in my 18-year career. We got another great one today. And I'm going to jump right into it, my man. Today's NWA World Heavyweight Champion is the 11th one I wrestled in my career. And this one won the title long after my first match with him. 16 years, to be exact, after I had my first match with him. So he had several nicknames. He called himself Mr. Knoxville. He wore a mask one time. Those fans that are Studcast fans, I'll know exactly who that is. They called him the one-man gang. Some people called him Fist of Stone, and others called him Rugged Ronnie Garvin. So Roger Barnes, alias Ronnie Garvin, was born on March the 30th, 1945, in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. He was trained by the great Pat Patterson, one of the great stars of all time, man. My dad wrestled against Pat Patterson way back. He was a tremendous wrestler, and I think he's still around. And then Ronnie started wrestling in 1962. He was 17 years old when he went in the ring. He had a 52-year career in the ring.
Wow.
Very successful wherever he went, and he won a whole lot of championships to boot. So let's just go back to Montreal, Canada, and kind of how it all began for him. He began his career in Montreal, in that Montreal area. And he began with having a whole lot of battles against another really famous wrestling family, like the Welches and lots of others, the Armstrongs, the Rougeaus, Jacques Rougeau and Jacques Rougeau's father and Jacques Rougeau's father's brother. I mean, so Rougeau's a famous family in the Montreal area, and Ronnie Garvin started out battling a whole lot of times with the Rougeaus. He ended up having a tag partner becoming tag partners with Terrence Garvin, who was no relation. And later, they were managed by Jimmy Garvin, who happened to be Ronnie's stepson.
Wow.
And Jimmy Garvin went on to a great career himself. So, the Garvins, between Ronnie and Jimmy, those two guys being related, they had great careers. Terrence reminded me a little bit of Jim Barnett. He had a whole style of his own, and he was a little bit different than certainly different than Ronnie was. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So those two guys toured much of the southern United States, at the territories in the South, in the late 1960s, and in 1970, Ronnie went to wrestle in Florida in the Tampa office, and he went on his own. He didn't go with Terry. I mean, they kind of split up after that, and he arrived there basically just a few months before I arrived there in 1970. He came in the late spring, and I came in the fall of 1970 to the Florida office, and I'd only been wrestling for about 6 months when we had our first match together, me and Ronnie. So we were soon what bookers called married to each other, meaning basically we were wrestling each other just about every night.
Yeah.
And I guess they got that because the husband and wife maybe wrestle a little bit every night, some of them anyway. So we just instinctively, me and him, seemed to have great matches together from the very first time we ever wrestled. Just clicked. Sometimes it happens with some guys. Ronnie was basically at that point, he'd been wrestling for 8 years, and he was a veteran at that point. And I learned a heck of a lot, man, from Ronnie Garvin, and had some great wrestling matches with him. He really taught me a lot about how to have a great wrestling match. Throughout 1971 and much of 1972, he and I were the main events in the smaller Florida cities that ran on the same night as the major cities of Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, That was a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night. And these were secondary cities, or the second town that was running on those nights. And during that time, I probably wrestled Ronnie Garvin maybe 200 times in that year and a half period of time.
Wow. Yeah.
And so our matches were really good, very good, and many of them were in these secondary cities. And during the time frame that we were wrestling in those towns, they had their best run ever at championship wrestling out of Florida in these smaller towns. We drew larger crowds than ever, and we sold out most of those towns every time we went there. And I remember the first time that they ever put us on the TV show with Gordon Sully. We were on the last match of the show, and our match was so good that day. Eddie had not seen us wrestle, and neither had Gordon, actually. And Eddie came in the dressing room, and Gordon also, after the television was over. And Eddie told us that now, he said, now, guys, I know why all these secondary cities that you guys have been selling out are selling out. So the next week and thereafter, just about, we were never on any of those small cities anymore. We graduated basically in the first time we were ever on TV together to the big time. So he left Florida in 1973, and I'm not sure what territory he went to during that period of time. I left a year later, went to Knoxville to open my first territory, Southeastern Wrestling. And I always said if I ever owned a wrestling company, he would be one of the first guys I'd hire. And because we just clicked good, and he had a way of training young guys and making old guys look good, you know. So, and I said that I'd love to have him if I ever could. It didn't happen quite as soon as I would have liked, but he did come to work for me in 1976. And he started as a heel. He was managed by Big Bad John. And it didn't take Ronnie long to start to make a name for himself. In fact, he really got that ball rolling when he threw the Southeastern Belt off the Gay Street Bridge, downtown Knoxville. Blocked traffic for 5 miles in both directions, and had the bridge full of fans.
Yeah.
So, it was a great start for him. And then he kind of boosted his name a little bit by jumping off the top rope on me several times at the end of the big NWA title match between me and Terry Funk in October of 1976. So then he switched to babyface for a short period in 1977, and then went back to heel. And when he did, he went in as a partner with Bob Orton Jr. And they were one of the best Southeastern tag teams of all time, undoubtedly. They practically never lost. And then he switched to babyface in 1978 for good. He was a huge star. It didn't make any difference whether he's a babyface or a heel. They hated him if he was heeling, and they loved him if he was a babyface. And he stayed there working for me until May of 1979, when the Knoxville Wrestling War began. So he spent much of the next 3 years after that war was over working for Angelo Poffo. Angelo Poffo was the father of Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yep.
And, and he was in the IWA for about 3 years. He was there for quite a while with Poffo. Then he went to work for the Crockett's in Mid-Atlantic Wrestling in 1984. And it is there that he won the NWA World title from Ric Flair on September 25th, 1987 at Starrcade. He lost it back to Flair 2 months, basically almost 2 months to the day later, on November 26, 1987 in Chicago, Illinois. Wow. So, in 1988, he spent some time in the AWA, the American Wrestling Association, or Alliance, or whichever they want to call it. And obviously it was Vern Gagne's territory. And he got over great there, too, as he had in most other places. In 1989 and 90, he went to work for the WWF. Yeah, and he worked, I assume, for Vince Jr. at this point. And he got over there as well, and just about wherever he went, he did. He worked a whole lot of independence after that. And then he got in the car business. He owned several car dealerships in North Carolina. And after that, and during this time frame, I don't know how long prior to say 1990 that he started flying planes, but he became a great pilot, and he started flying planes for private companies. So he was pretty a diverse individual, man. He could pretty much do a whole lot of things. And as with all of those former NWA champions, he held belts everywhere he went. You can just go back and look at the NWA champions, and they tell all the belts that they've held. And the big guys held them all just about. Mm. So in my opinion, my humble opinion, I guess I'll throw that in there, he was one of the best wrestlers in history. And for fans that would like to learn more about him and the Knoxville War of 1979, he's on one of my Super Studcasts. And you can find it on my website at TN Stud. Click Super Studcast and look up Ronnie Garvin, and I think you'll find that to be very interesting. We talk about everything in his wrestling career. We talk about the War of Knoxville, 1979. Fascinating stuff. And, everybody's opinion was, there was stories going around that Ronnie was part of the group that wrestled against my company. And we in this program kind of settled the score. We talked about, was it a good decision that he made to go in that direction and go with the opposition to the Southeastern? And he basically said, no, if he had it to do over, he would have not done it. It was a bad idea, and it wasn't the right thing to do. And it really bothered me because I got along so well with Ronnie. He loved Knoxville. He loved the mountains. He loved the lakes. He had a boat. He had a couple of boats. And if he had not gone with that group and he had stayed with me, he would have ended up going to Pensacola with me and Bob Armstrong and Tony Charles, and Stomper went there. LeDuc went down there. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys went to Pensacola, and they became just as fascinated and in love with Pensacola as they were in Knoxville, because he could have had his boat there and he could have run it in the Gulf, man, and Pensacola Bay. Right. He would have loved it, man. He could have done the fishing and everything else. So, when we talked in this Super Studcast, he missed all that, and he understands that, that was super time, and he could have made some great money. So, I really thought Ronnie was a tremendous wrestler and really a good person too. He just got on the wrong side when it came time to figure out what he wanted to do in Knoxville after 1979. So thank everybody as usual for joining me, and I hope you join me next time. We're going to be doing the last NWA World Champion that I wrestled, and it should be, in my estimation, maybe the best one of these NWA Champion Series, and it will be about maybe the best champion, the guy that could be maybe the best of all of them. It's going to be about Ric Flair.
Wow.